The scars traced down Helena Jennings' right cheek like lightning frozen in flesh, a permanent reminder of the barn fire that had claimed her family's livelihood 3 years ago in the summer of 1881. And as she sat in the back pew of Hachita's small wooden church this sweltering August morning in 1884, she could feel the familiar weight of judgmental stares pressing against her shoulders. She kept her eyes down during Pastor William's sermon about vanity and pride, her worn Bible clutched in trembling hands, the pages soft from years of use. The scars weren't just on her face. They crawled down her neck, disappeared beneath the high collar of her best Sunday dress, and continued across her shoulder and down her right arm. She had been 17 when it happened, trapped in the burning barn while trying to save the horses. Her father had pulled her out, but not before the flames had left their mark. Her mother had died 2 winters later from pneumonia, and her father had followed 6 months ago from a heart that simply gave out. Now at 20, Helena lived alone in the small house on the edge of town, taking in laundry and mending to survive. The whispers started as they always did when the congregation stood to sing. Mrs. Peterson leaned toward Mrs. Crawford, her hand barely concealing her mouth. Helena caught the words such as shame and unmarriageable. Her throat tightened, but she lifted her voice anyway, singing the hymn her mother had loved. She refused to let their cruelty silence her completely. After the service, Helena gathered her things quickly, hoping to slip out before the usual gathering on the church steps. But Mrs. Peterson blocked her path, her daughter Sarah standing smugly beside her. "Helena, dear," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was just telling Sarah how brave you are to show your face in public. Not everyone could bear such disfigurement with your particular brand of stubbornness." Sarah giggled behind her gloved hand. "Mother says it's a blessing you never had any suitors before the fire." "At least you don't know what you're missing." Heat flooded Helena's cheeks, but whether from shame or anger she couldn't tell. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, don't rush off," Mrs. Crawford joined in, her fan fluttering. "We were just discussing how unfortunate it is that you insist on attending services. Some of the newer families find your appearance rather unsettling. Perhaps you might consider worshiping at home." The words hit like physical blows. Helena's vision blurred with unshed tears, but she held her head high. "My faith is between me and God, Mrs. Crawford. I have as much right to be here as anyone." "Rights and wisdom are different things, dear," Mrs. Peterson said. "A truly selfless person would consider the comfort of others." "Those scars are quite disturbing to look at, especially during communion." "That's enough." The voice came from behind Helena, deep and firm. She turned to find a man she'd never seen before standing in the aisle. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of weathered cedar. He wore dusty riding clothes and a Stetson that he held respectfully in his hands, but there was nothing soft about his expression. "I beg your pardon, Mrs." Peterson drew herself up indignantly. The stranger stepped closer, positioning himself beside Helena. "I said that's enough. I've been standing here for 5 minutes listening to you 3 harpies tear down this young woman, and I've heard plenty." Mrs. Crawford gasped. "How dare you?" "We're respectable women of this community." "Respectable?" The stranger's laugh was harsh. "There's nothing respectable about mocking someone for scars they earned in an act of bravery. I heard about the barn fire from the shopkeeper yesterday. Miss Jennings here ran into a burning building to save animals. That takes more courage than most men I know possess." Helena stared at him, her heart pounding. No one had ever defended her like this. No one had ever called her brave. "You're new here," Sarah said, her tone turning flirtatious despite her mother's outrage. You don't understand our ways. I understand cruelty just fine, and it looks the same everywhere." He turned to Helena, his expression softening. "Those scars don't make you weak, Miss Jennings. They prove you're a survivor. They prove you have the kind of strength most people only pretend to have." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks before she could stop them. The stranger offered her a clean handkerchief, and she took it with shaking hands. "Well, I never," Mrs. Peterson huffed. "Come along, Sarah. We don't associate with rude drifters." The three women swept past, their skirts rustling with indignation. Helena dabbed at her eyes, acutely aware that half the congregation was watching. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He offered a small smile. "I'm Kane Dalton. I just bought the old Murphy Ranch about 10 miles south of town. Been fixing it up for the past month, but today was my first time coming into Hatchita proper." Helena Jennings. She managed to return his smile, though her face felt hot. "I hope your first impression of our town hasn't been entirely terrible. The town seems fine. Some of the people could use a lesson in basic human decency, but the town itself is nice enough." He fell into step beside her as she moved toward the door. "May I walk you home, Miss Jennings? I get the feeling those ladies might have more to say if you're alone." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'd appreciate that, Mr. Dalton." Outside, the August sun beat down mercilessly, typical of southern New Mexico. The sky stretched endlessly blue above them, not a cloud in sight. Helena led the way down the dusty main street, past the general store and the saloon, toward the smaller houses on the eastern edge of town. "You really bought the Murphy place?" she asked, glad for a neutral topic. "I heard old Mr. Murphy moved to California to live with his son." "That's right. The ranch needs work, but it's got good water and decent grazing land. I'm planning to raise horses, maybe some cattle." Kane adjusted his hat against the sun. "Been ranching most of my life. Had a place up in Colorado, but after my parents passed, I wanted a fresh start." "I'm sorry about your parents. Thank you. It's been 2 years now. Still feels strange sometimes, knowing they're gone." He glanced at her. "I heard in town that you lost your father recently. I'm sorry for your loss as well." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. A dust devil spun across the empty lot beside them, dissipating as quickly as it formed. "Can I ask you something?" Helena said quietly. "Why did you really defend me back there? You don't know me. For all you know, they might have had good reason to want me gone." Kane stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Miss Jennings, I spent 4 years fighting in the Apache Wars before I bought my first ranch. I saw men torn apart by bullets and arrows. I watched friends die from infected wounds, saw soldiers burned when an ammunition wagon exploded. I know what real scars look like, and I know what they cost." He gestured toward her face, but not in a cruel way, more like he was simply acknowledging a fact. "Your scars are proof you survived something terrible. They're nothing to be ashamed of." Helena felt something crack open inside her chest, some tight knot of pain she'd been carrying for 3 years. "Most people can barely look at me. Then most people are fools." His voice was gentle but certain. "I see a woman who was brave enough to risk her life for creatures that couldn't save themselves. I see someone who kept singing in church, even when surrounded by people who wanted her silent. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." They reached her small house, weathered but neatly kept, with a vegetable garden along one side. Helena's laundry line stretched across the yard, empty on Sunday morning. "This is me," she said, suddenly self-conscious about the humble property. The paint was peeling and the porch sagged slightly on one side. "It's a good house," Kane said. "Well maintained. That's not easy when you're on your own." "I manage." She handed back his handkerchief. "Thank you again, Mr. Dalton, for everything." "Would you allow me to call on you sometime, Miss Jennings?" The question came out a bit rushed, as if he'd been working up to it. "Maybe next Sunday after church. We could have lunch, talk more. I'd like to get to know you better." Helena's first instinct was to refuse, to protect him from the gossip that would surely follow. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw only sincerity and warmth. When was the last time anyone had looked at her that way? "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." His smile transformed his face, revealing dimples she hadn't noticed before. "Then I'll see you next Sunday, Miss Jennings." She watched him walk back toward town, his long strides eating up the dusty road. Only when he disappeared from view did she go inside, her heart beating faster than it had in years. The week passed slowly. Helena threw herself into her work, scrubbing clothes until her hands were raw, mending tears in shirts and dresses with tiny, precise stitches. But her mind kept wandering to Kane Dalton, to the way he'd stood up for her without hesitation, to the gentleness in his voice when he called her brave. On Wednesday, she was hanging laundry when Mrs. Thompson, one of her few kind customers, stopped by to collect her husband's shirts. "I heard what happened at church," Mrs. Thompson said, counting out coins into Helena's palm. "About that new rancher defending you caused quite a stir." Helena felt her stomach drop. "I imagine it did. Oh, don't look so worried, dear. Half the town is talking about how it's about time someone put those Peterson women in their place. The other half is just curious about Mr. Dalton." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "He's been in town a few times this week, asking questions about you. Very proper questions, mind you. Asking if you're truly alone, if anyone's looking after you, whether your business is sound." "He has." Helena couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Indeed. And he bought supplies from the general store, enough for a proper Sunday lunch. Mr. Henderson said he was very particular about getting good cheese and fresh bread." Mrs. Thompson patted Helena's arm. "I think the young man is quite taken with you." After Mrs. Thompson left, Helena stood in her garden, letting the news sink in. Kane had been asking about her. He was planning their lunch carefully. The thought made her feel warm and nervous and hopeful all at once. She spent Saturday afternoon preparing herself, washing her hair with her precious lavender soap, pressing her second-best dress, the pale blue one that her mother had made. The scars showed no matter what she wore, but the blue fabric made her eyes brighter, or so her mother had always said. Sunday morning found her walking to church alone as always, but this time her steps were lighter. She arrived early and took her usual seat in the back. The church filled slowly and she felt the familiar stares, heard the whispers. But she kept her head up, remembering Kane's words. Survivor, not weak. Kane arrived just as the service was starting, sliding into the pew beside her. He smelled like soap and leather, and when he smiled at her, Helena felt her worries fade. After the service, they walked together past Mrs. Peterson and her friends. The women's faces were pinched with disapproval, but they said nothing. Kane's presence was like a shield. "I thought we could have lunch by the creek," Kane said as they left town behind. "There's a spot about a mile out with cottonwood trees for shade. It's a bit of a walk, but I brought everything in my saddlebags." His horse, a handsome bay gelding, was tied near the church. Kane untied him and led him along as they walked, the animal's hooves raising small puffs of dust. The creek was exactly as Kane described, a ribbon of water cutting through the brown landscape, flanked by towering cottonwoods. The sound of flowing water was peaceful, a relief from the dusty silence of town. Kane spread a blanket in the shade and unpacked his saddlebags with the care of someone who'd planned carefully. Fresh bread, cheese, cold chicken, apples, and even a small jar of jam. "This is wonderful," Helena said, genuinely touched by the effort. You didn't have to go to so much trouble. It's no trouble. I wanted to do something nice. He settled across from her on the blanket, removing his hat. Tell me about your family, if you don't mind, before the fire. So Helena talked, and found it easier than she'd expected. She told him about her father's quiet strength, her mother's beautiful singing voice, the way their small farm had been filled with love even when money was tight. She told him about the night of the fire, how she'd heard the horses screaming and hadn't thought, just ran. Kane listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. My father never blamed me, she said quietly, but I always wondered if he should have. If I'd been smarter, faster, maybe I could have saved more. We lost 2 horses that night and most of our equipment. The vet bills for the surviving horses nearly bankrupted us. You saved 3 horses, Kane said firmly. 3 animals that would have burned to death in terror. That's not nothing, Helena. That's everything to those horses. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and she felt a little thrill at the sound of it in his deep voice. Tell me about Colorado, she said, wanting to shift the focus from herself. What made you leave? Kane plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between his fingers. After my parents died, the ranch felt empty. Every corner reminded me of them. My mother in the kitchen, my father mending fence. I kept expecting to see them, and the disappointment when I didn't, that got hard to bear. He looked up at the cottonwood leaves rustling overhead. I needed to build something new, something that was just mine. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Helena bit into an apple, the sweetness bursting on her tongue. I feel the same way about my house sometimes. But I can't afford to leave, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. It's still home, even with all the ghosts. They talked through the afternoon, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Kane told her about his plans for the ranch, his dream of breeding quality horses. Helena shared her love of reading, how she taught herself from her mother's small collection of books. They discovered shared opinions on everything from the best way to make coffee to whether the territory would ever become a state. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Kane walked Helena home. At her gate, he hesitated. May I see you again? Not just Sundays. Maybe I could come by during the week, help with anything you need around the house. I noticed your porch could use some work. I couldn't ask you to do that, Helena protested. You have your own ranch to worry about. You're not asking, I'm offering. His eyes were warm. Besides, I've been doing nothing but ranch work for a month. I could use an excuse to come to town more often. Helena felt herself blush. Well, if you're sure, the porch does need attention, and the roof has a leak in the bedroom. Then I'll come by Tuesday with tools. He smiled at her, and Helena's heart did a strange flip in her chest. Tuesday arrived with Kane bringing not just tools but lumber from his own stores. He spent the day working on her porch, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hammer ringing in the clear air. Helena brought him water and lunch and found herself watching the way his muscles moved as he worked, the concentration on his face as he measured and cut. You're good at this, she said, sitting on the steps he'd already repaired. My father taught me. He believed a rancher should be able to fix anything on his property. Kane wiped sweat from his forehead. It's satisfying work, building and repairing. You can see the results of your effort right away. He came back on Thursday to fix the roof, then on Saturday to repair the fence around her vegetable garden. Each visit stretched longer as they found more to talk about, more reasons to linger in each other's company. The town noticed, of course. Helena heard the whispers when she went to the general store, saw the speculative looks. But Kane had done something unexpected. By treating her with open respect and affection, by being seen working on her property in broad daylight, he'd made it clear that his interest was honorable. Slowly, Grudgingly, the worst of the gossip faded. People were still curious, still somewhat scandalized, but they couldn't accuse Kane of taking advantage or Helena of impropriety. 3 weeks after that first Sunday, Kane took Helena on a proper buggy ride out to his ranch. The Murphy place had been transformed. The house was freshly painted, the corrals repaired, and a dozen horses grazed in the pasture. "This is incredible," Helena breathed, taking in the neat property. "You've done all this in just over a month. I had help from some ranch hands, but yes. I wanted to get it functional before winter." He helped her down from the buggy, his hands warm around her waist. "Come see the house. I want your opinion on something." Inside, the house was sparsely furnished but clean. Kane led her to a room off the main living area, clearly meant to be a bedroom but currently empty. "I was thinking this could be a library," he said. "You mentioned loving to read, and I thought, well, a house should have a room dedicated to books. But I don't know much about organizing such things. Would you help me? Help me choose books, arrange the room?" Helena turned to him, emotion tightening her throat. "Kane, that's such a lovely idea, but why ask me? You could hire someone. Because I want you here." The words came out raw and honest. "I want you in this house, sharing ideas, making it a home. I know it's fast, Helena. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've never been more certain of anything." "I feel it too," she whispered. "It scares me how much I feel." Kane stepped closer, reaching up slowly to cup her scarred cheek. Helena's first instinct was to pull away, but she forced herself to stay still. His thumb traced one of the scars gently, reverently. "You're beautiful," he said softly. "Every part of you. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." "I'm trying," she admitted. "Being with you makes it easier. You make me feel like maybe I'm not broken after all. You were never broken. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see your worth." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her, gentle and sweet and perfect. Helena melted into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. The kiss deepened, and she felt something inside her bloom, some part of her heart she'd thought dead coming back to life. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it's soon. I know people will talk, but I don't care about any of that. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you. Say yes, Helena." Please say yes. She should be cautious. She should take more time. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw her future, bright and full of possibility. "Yes," she said, laughing through sudden tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Kane whooped and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, longer this time, full of promise and joy. They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where they'd met, with Mrs. Thompson and her husband as witnesses. Mrs. Peterson and her friends stayed away, but Helena didn't care. She wore a new dress that Kane had insisted on buying, cream-colored with lace at the collar that didn't quite hide her scars. But for the first time in years, Helena didn't try to hide. Kane loved her exactly as she was. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and decisions, learning each other's habits and rhythms. But it was also wonderful. Helena threw herself into making the ranch house a home, adding curtains and rugs, filling the kitchen with good smells. The library room slowly filled with books that Kane ordered from catalogs, both new and used, building the collection with care. Helena continued her laundry and mending business at first, but as the ranch prospered, Kane gently convinced her to take on less work. "You don't have to prove anything," he told her. "You can work because you want to, not because you have to." So she became more selective, taking only the work she enjoyed, and spent more time helping Kane with the horses. She discovered she had a gift for gentling the young ones, her quiet patience perfect for the work. That first winter was harsh, with winds that howled around the house and temperatures that dropped below freezing. But inside, with a fire crackling and Kane's arms around her, Helena had never felt warmer. They spent long evenings reading aloud to each other, playing cards, talking about their dreams for the ranch. "I want to breed the finest horses in the territory," Kane said one night, his head in her lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. "Horses known for their intelligence and temperament, not just their speed." "You'll do it," Helena said confidently. "You have a gift with them. They trust you." "They trust you too. I've seen how even the skittish ones calm down when you're near." He caught her hand and kissed her scarred palm. "You bring peace wherever you go, Helena." Spring arrived with wildflowers blooming across the range and foals being born in the pasture. Helena spent hours watching the young horses, marveling at their gangly beauty. She felt different that spring, tired in a new way, and when Mrs. Thompson came to visit and noticed her turning green at the smell of coffee, the older woman smiled knowingly. "I think you need to see the doctor in town, dear," Mrs. Thompson said gently. The doctor confirmed what Helena had already begun to suspect. She was pregnant, due in late autumn. Kane nearly fell over when she told him, his face cycling through shock, joy, and terror in rapid succession. "We're having a baby," he said, as if testing the words. Then louder, laughing, "We're having a baby." He picked her up carefully, spinning her gently. "Are you happy? I'm terrified and thrilled, and I don't even know what else." "I'm happy," Helena said, and meant it completely. "I'm so happy I could burst." They prepared through the summer, Kane building a cradle from smooth pine, Helena sewing tiny clothes. The ranch hands were excited, already placing bets on whether the baby would be a boy or girl. Kane insisted Helena rest more, worried about her health, and though she rolled her eyes at his hovering, she was secretly touched by his concern. The baby came on a cold November night, arriving after 12 hours of difficult labor. Kane paced holes in the floor while Mrs. Thompson and the doctor attended Helena. When the baby's first cry split the air, Kane burst into the room, ignoring the doctor's protests. "A boy," Mrs. Thompson announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, strong boy." Kane looked down at his son, wonder transforming his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. Then he looked at Helena, exhausted but smiling on the bed. "You're amazing. You're the strongest person I've ever known." They named him James after Kane's father. James Dalton came into the world already demanding attention, with a powerful set of lungs and his father's dark hair. Kane was a natural father, patient and gentle, walking the floor at night with James when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, completely besotted with his son. Helena watched her husband with their baby and felt her heart expand even further. This was the family she'd dreamed of during those dark years after the fire, the love she'd thought she'd never have. When James was 6 months old, they baptized him in the same church where Kane had first defended Helena. The congregation had changed somewhat. Some people had moved away, new families had arrived. Mrs. Peterson still attended, but she kept her distance, her remarks kept to herself or at least out of Helena's hearing. After the service, a young woman approached Helena hesitantly. She was new to town, and she had a birthmark covering half her face, port wine-colored and prominent. "Mrs. Dalton," the woman said quietly, "I'm Martha Green. My family just moved here last month. I wanted to thank you. Thank me, whatever for being here, for not hiding." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I've spent my whole life covering my face, ashamed of my birthmark. But seeing you, seeing how you hold your head high, how your husband looks at you like you hung the moon, it gives me hope. If you can find love and happiness, maybe I can too." Helena took the younger woman's hands. "You will. I promise you will. The right person won't see your birthmark as a flaw. They'll see you, all of you, and love you for it. Kane appeared at her shoulder, James in his arms. Miss Green, you should know that my wife is one of the bravest people in this territory. She earned those scars saving lives, and I've never been prouder to stand beside anyone. You wear your birthmark the same way, with pride. Anyone who can't see past it to the person you are isn't worth your time. Martha left with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Helena watched her go and felt something settle in her chest. The pain of those years, the mockery and loneliness, they hadn't been for nothing. She could use her experience to help others, to show them that being different didn't mean being less. The years flowed past like water in the creek. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then an adventurous boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. The ranch prospered, Kane's reputation for fine horses spreading throughout New Mexico and beyond. They hired more hands, expanded the operation, built a bigger barn. When James was 3, Helena became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the labor was easier. They welcomed a daughter in the spring of 1889, a tiny thing with Helena's eyes and Kane's dimples. They named her Rose, and James was immediately protective of his baby sister. More years passed, filled with the daily rhythms of ranch life. Horses to train, children to raise, a household to run. Helena's scars faded slightly with time, becoming silver against her skin, but they never disappeared. She stopped thinking about them much, though. When your husband kissed them every morning, and your children traced them with curious fingers and asked for the story of the brave horses, they became just another part of you. In 1892, Helena received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from Martha Green, who had married a rancher from a neighboring county. She and her husband had a baby son, and Martha wanted Helena to know how much that conversation at church had changed her life. "You gave me hope when I had none," Martha wrote. "You showed me that true love sees past the surface to the soul beneath. I am so grateful to you and your husband for your kindness. You changed my life that day." Helena showed the letter to Kane that night as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of crimson and gold. James and Rose were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You ever think about that first day?" Helena asked, leaning against Kane's shoulder. "When you stood up for me in church?" "Every day," Kane said, wrapping his arm around her. "Best decision I ever made." "Well, second best. First best was asking you to marry me. I was so scared that day, so tired of being mocked, of feeling like I didn't belong anywhere." Helena watched their children play, her heart full. "You gave me back my life, Kane. You made me feel beautiful again. You are beautiful. You always were." He turned her face toward him gently, his thumb tracing the familiar paths of her scars. "These scars, they're part of your story. They're part of what made you the woman I love. I wouldn't change a single thing about you, even when I burned dinner." "Well, maybe that," Kane said, grinning, "but everything else is perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, grateful for the life they'd built together. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful. Inside the house, the library was filled with books, a testament to shared dreams realized. The horses in the pasture were the finest in 3 counties, sought after by ranchers and cavalry officers alike. But more than the material success, there was love. It filled every corner of their home, evident in the way Kane still looked at Helena like she was the most precious thing in his world, in the way Helena trusted him completely, in the way their children were growing up confident and kind, knowing they were cherished. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Kane pulled Helena into their bedroom and held her close. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. I loved you from that first moment in the church, when you kept singing even though those horrible women were mocking you. I saw your strength, your courage, your beautiful soul, and I've loved you more every day since. I love you too, Helena said, tilting her face up for his kiss. You saved me, Kane, not just from those women but from the prison I'd built around myself. You showed me I was worth loving. You always were, I just helped you see it. He kissed her then, deep and sweet and full of promise. And I'll keep showing you every day for the rest of our lives. More years passed, good years filled with hard work and happiness. James grew into a fine young man who shared his father's gift with horses. Rose became a spirited teenager with a talent for healing animals, learning veterinary skills from the new doctor who'd settled in Hachita. They had one more child, another son they named Samuel, who arrived in 1894 and completed their family. The ranch became known not just for its horses, but for its kindness. Kane and Helena had a reputation for giving people second chances, for seeing past surface differences to the worth beneath. They hired hands that other ranchers rejected, people with checkered pasts or physical differences, and gave them steady work and respect. In 1898, when Helena turned 34, Kane threw a party at the ranch. Friends came from all over the territory, the house and yard filled with people, music, and laughter. As Helena looked around at the celebration, she marveled at how much her life had changed. She was surrounded by people who loved her, respected her, who saw her as she truly was. Mrs. Thompson, older now and moving slowly, found Helena in the kitchen. I remember when you were a scared young woman, hiding in the back of that church, the older woman said, taking Helena's hand. Look at you now. A successful rancher's wife, mother to 3 beautiful children, respected throughout the county. I'm so proud of you, dear. I couldn't have done it without people like you, Helena said, hugging her carefully. You were kind when kindness was rare. I never forgot that. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Kane and Helena stood on their porch, his arms around her waist, her back against his chest. The children were asleep inside, worn out from the excitement. The horses were quiet in their corrals and stars blazed overhead in the clear night sky. Happy birthday, Kane murmured, kissing her temple. Though I feel like I'm the one who got the gift. You've given me everything, Helena. A home, a family, a purpose. You've made my life complete. We've made each other complete, Helena corrected, turning in his arms. We're partners, you and me, equal in all things. Equal in all things, Kane agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The years continued their steady march. The children grew up, James eventually taking over more of the ranch operations. Rose going back east to veterinary college, one of the first women to do so. Samuel showing an interest in breeding that matched his father's. Helena and Kane grew older together, their faces lined with time but their love as strong as ever. In 1905, they celebrated their 20th anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. The children were grown, pursuing their own dreams, though they visited often. The ranch ran smoothly, a well-oiled machine that no longer needed constant supervision. 20 years, Helena marveled, looking at Kane across the candlelit table. It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. Best 20 years of my life, Kane said, raising his glass. Here's to 20 more and 20 after that. They touched glasses, the crystal ringing clear in the quiet room. Outside, a new generation of foals played in the pasture. Inside, the library held hundreds of books now, a collection they'd built together over 2 decades. The walls were covered with photographs of their family, moments captured and preserved. Helena thought back to that terrified young woman in the church, the one who'd been told she was too damaged to be loved. How wrong they'd been. She hadn't been damaged at all. She'd been tempered, made stronger by what she'd survived, and Kane had seen that strength from the very beginning. "What are you thinking about?" Kane asked, watching her face. "Just how lucky I am, how blessed. I almost didn't go to church that day. I was so tired of the mockery, so close to giving up and just staying home like Mrs. Crawford suggested." She reached across the table to take his hand. "If I hadn't gone, we never would have met. Then I would have found another way to meet you," Kane said firmly. "I truly believe we were meant to find each other, Helena. Some things are just destiny." "Maybe so." She smiled at him, this man who changed her entire life with a few words and an open heart. "I'm grateful every day that our destinies aligned." They finished dinner and moved to the porch, their favorite spot, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of amber and rose. This land had witnessed their love story, from those first tentative conversations to the deep partnership they now shared. Every fence post, every building, every tree they'd planted together was a testament to what they'd built. "You know what I think about when I look at you," Kane said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "What's that?" "I think about courage. I think about the bravery it took for you to keep going after the fire, to keep showing up even when people were cruel. I think about the strength it took to let me in, to trust me with your heart when you'd been hurt so badly." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Helena Dalton. Those scars you bear, they're medals of honor as far as I'm concerned." Helena felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. "You gave me back myself, Kane. You helped me see that surviving wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to celebrate. And I'll keep telling you that for as long as I live." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly against him as she always had. The stars emerged one by one, diamond bright in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and the horses whickered softly in response. This was home, built not just with wood and nails but with love and respect, and the kind of deep partnership that only comes from truly seeing each other. Helena thought about Martha Green, now a successful rancher's wife with 4 children. She thought about the other people over the years who told her that her story had given them hope, had shown them that different didn't mean less. She thought about her own children, growing up confident in their worth, never doubting for a moment that they were loved exactly as they were. This was her legacy, she realized, not the scars themselves, but what they'd taught her. That survival was its own kind of victory. That real love saw past the surface to the soul beneath. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. "Thank you," she whispered to Kane. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for being exactly who you are." She tilted her face up, finding his lips in the growing darkness. "For proving that some cowboys are real heroes." Kane laughed softly, the sound warm and familiar. "If I'm a hero, it's only because you made me brave enough to be one. You inspire me every day, Helena. Every single day." They stayed on the porch until the last light faded from the sky, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they'd built together. Inside the house, photographs documented their journey. Outside, the ranch stood testament to their hard work and dedication. But here, in this moment, it was just the two of them, just like it had been that first Sunday by the creek. Helena's scars had faded to silver lines, barely noticeable in the twilight, but they were still there and they always would be. They were part of her story, part of what had led her to this moment, this man, this life. She wouldn't erase them even if she could. They had taught her too much, brought her too far, led her to too much happiness. Kane traced one of the scars gently, his touch reverent. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Every part of you." And in his eyes, in the warmth of his embrace, in the solid reality of the life they'd built, Helena finally truly believed it. She was beautiful. She was strong. She was loved beyond measure. The scars weren't marks of damage, but proof of survival, evidence of courage, symbols of a strength that nothing could break. As they finally went inside, Kane's arm around her waist, Helena sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For second chances. For men brave enough to stand up for what was right. For love that saw past scars to the person beneath. For a life richer and fuller than she'd ever imagined possible. She was a survivor, just as Kane had said all those years ago in that church. And surviving had led her here to this perfect moment, this perfect love, this perfect life. She wouldn't change a single thing, not even the fire, because it had all led her exactly where she was meant to be. In Kane's arms, in their home, surrounded by the evidence of their love and life together, Helena Jennings Dalton was finally, completely, beautifully whole.